Hey everyone, Mr. Voikin here, and we're moving on to Unit 5, Lesson 4. The instructions for this lesson are very similar to what we've done previously, so hopefully we'll get through this fairly quick. But we're basically going to be introducing the square of a binomial. So you want to get familiar with this right here. The square of a binomial can be found by squaring the first term, and then doubling the product of the two terms, and finally squaring the last term. So let me break that down for you. We're going to take a look at these two right here. So you can see that it says the first thing we're going to do is square the first term. So I've got x plus 7 all squared. So I've got this binomial inside of that the brackets, and we're squaring it. So really what we're doing is x plus 7 times x plus 7. So if we were going to set this up, it would be set up like this, and I would follow through using the distributive properties, or FOIL as we call it. Okay, but if I follow what it says up top, I can sort of get there a little bit quicker. So what does it say? Square the first term. Well, x squared becomes x squared. The part that's in yellow says double the product of the first two terms. So here are my two terms right here. So I'm going to double the product. So product means multiplying. So it's like x times 7, which is 7x. And then I'm going to double that, so we end up with 14x. Yeah, so what we basically did was we went 7 times x, which is 7x, and then I'm just taking that and multiplying it by 2, which gives us that 14x. And finally, highlighted in blue right there, it says square the last term. Well, the last term is 7, so 7 squared is 49. So let's take that to the second and third examples that we have here. So number 1 says square 3x. So what is 3x times 3x? It is going to be 9x squared. Then what do I want to do? Multiply these two together. So 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. And then what am I going to do? Double it, which means multiply it by 2. So negative 3 times 2 is negative 6 and x. So the middle term in our trinomial that we're creating is going to be negative 6x. And finally, it says take the last term, which is a negative 1, and I'm going to square it. So basically, negative 1 times negative 1, negative times negative is a positive 1. Okay, and let's do the last one, which is 2m minus 3n all squared. So this one's a little bit more complex, but let's deal with the first and last terms first. So 2m squared is basically 2m times 2m, which is going to be 4m squared. The last term is negative 3n. So negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And n times n is n squared. Now, the middle term is found by going 2m times 3n, and then basically doubling that. So if we take the inside of these brackets right here, and we go 2m times 3n, that's going to give us 6mn. And then what do I need to do? I need to multiply that by 2, which is going to give me 12mn. And that becomes, now, the one thing I do have to be careful of is that's a negative 3 in there, n, which means that's going to be a negative 6mn, which means that's going to be a negative 12mn. So this is minus 12mn. So there's our final answers. Now, if you want to verify this, basically what you're going to do is take the x plus 7, multiply it by the x plus 7. And we're going to do the first, the outside, the inside, and then finally the, the last. Okay, so if we look at this, what is x times x? That is going to be x squared. And what is the outside? X times 7. That is going to be plus 7x. And then we got the inside terms, which is 7 times x, which again is plus 7x. And finally, we got the last terms, which is 7 times 7, which is going to give us 49. And when I combine these two that are in the middle, 7x and 7x, we are going to get 14x. And there's our positive 49 right there. Don't forget to include that plus sign, and our x squared. So basically, you could do the same thing with this and the same with that to verify that your answer is correct. All right, we're going to take a look at examples D and E. Now, it sort of looks like the same as A, B, and C, except for one small difference is that these would be the same because it's being squared. So that would be x plus 7 times x plus 7. So notice here that we've got a 4 minus 7x, and then we've got a 4 plus 7x. And over here, I've got a 5a plus 3b and a 5a minus 3b. Okay, so these are not the same. They're different. One has a negative and one has a positive, or a subtraction and an addition. So let's expand these out and see if we can see a pattern or a rule that emerges from that. Okay, so let's start off with multiplying the first together. So 4 times 4 becomes 16. Now we're going to go to the outside. Okay, so we got 4 times 7x, and that is going to be a plus 28x. Now if we go to the inside ones, I've got a 4 times a negative 7x, which is going to give us negative 28x. And finally, on the last ones, I've got negative 7x times positive 7x, which is going to be a negative times a positive, which is a negative. 7 times 7 is 49, and x times x is x squared. Now, hopefully, you can see that in here, I've got a positive 28x and a negative 28x, and those two will just cancel each other out. So we are left with 16 minus 49x squared. Now, although that answer is correct, we're better off putting it into descending order. So I would just rewrite this as negative 49x squared plus 16, and that would be our final answer. Okay, now let's move down to the one that's below. Same thing, just a little bit more complex. We got two variables in there, but I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm going to multiply 5a times 5a in our first position, and that's going to become 25a squared. Then I'm going to multiply the outsides, which is 5a times negative 3b. Just really be careful with those signs in front of the terms. So make sure you know that it's a negative and say it to yourself so that you're not forgetting. So it's a negative 15ab. Now if we move to the inside terms, we've got positive 3b times a 5a, a positive 5a. That's going to be a positive 15ab. Okay, and finally, our last ones are positive 3b times negative 3b, which is going to be a negative 9b squared. And just like up above, the two middle terms are gone because they're going to cancel each other, leaving us with 25a squared minus 9b squared. And I would leave it in that form, and basically it's because a comes before b, and they both have the same degree, so this is probably the best form to leave it in. Okay, let's take a look at the class example number 2 out of the booklet, and it just tells us to expand and simplify. The only difference here is that we're just adding this third sort of operation right here. But what do we have? We got 5 times whatever's in that bracket times whatever's in that bracket. And essentially we're doing multiplication, so what do we want to make sure we're doing? Well, following the rules of bed mass. So first of all, we want to take a look. Are there any brackets? Yes, there's 2 brackets. Can I do anything inside those brackets? Any operations or simplifying? And the answer is no. So the B doesn't really count here because I'm not doing anything inside the brackets. Okay, and now I'm asking myself, are there any exponents? The answer is no. And then we go to division and multiplication, and that's what we've got. We've got a multiplication and a multiplication right here. So essentially I can do it just in order from left to right, but it essentially doesn't really matter. But that's the way we're going to do it. So we're going to start off with the first operation, which is 5 times 2x minus 3. So 5 times 2x becomes 10x, and 5 times negative 3 is going to be negative 15. So I need to keep that in brackets right there because I'm going to be multiplying the product of that times the next binomial, which was x minus 6. And now I'm basically just going to use FOIL, feed the chickens, and run this all the way through. Okay, so 10x times x is going to be 10x squared. I deal with the outside ones. 10x times negative 6 is going to be negative 60x. On the inside, I got negative 15 times x, which is negative 15x. And finally, on the outside, I've got negative 15 times negative 6. 2 negatives makes a positive, and 15 times 6 is 80. Now I need to combine the like terms that make up our middle term, and I'm left with 10x squared minus 75x and plus 80. Okay, let's take a look at the next one, which is negative 8 times 7p plus 3 squared. Okay, now we are going to be using BEDMAS again here. And in this case, we do have some exponents. So there's our exponent right there. So it says I need to perform that operation first. So the first thing I'm going to do is 7p plus 3 squared. Okay, now you can follow the rules that we just learned up above, or you can expand this out. So we end up with 49p squared plus 21p plus 21p plus 9, giving us 49p squared plus 42p plus 9. So that needs to remain in the brackets, and then we're going to multiply this whole thing through by a negative 8. And the last thing we need to do is multiply this negative 8 times all 3 terms in the trinomial. So negative 8 times times positive 49p squared is going to be negative 392p squared. Negative 8 times 42 is going to be a negative 336p, and negative 8 times positive 9 is going to be a negative 72. And that will be our final answer. Okay, class example number 3, just a little bit of the same, except they're just getting sort of a little bit more complex. So a few things to recognize right off the bat is we've got this right here. So I've got my difference of squares, positive and negative in there. X plus 5, x minus 5. So again, we can just expand that out using FOIL or follow sort of the shortcut rules that we looked at earlier. Okay, on this side, we're just going to have to expand that straight out. And don't forget, we're going to be subtracting whatever is on the left side. We're going to subtract the right side from that. Okay, so remember, that's where we're going to change that to a positive, and everything that ends up in this bracket, we're going to change the signs of that. Okay, so let's lay this out here. We got x plus 5 times x minus 5. From that, I'm going to subtract x plus 2 times x plus 8. So remember, over here, we can basically follow those rules, which is going to be x squared. The middle terms are going to cancel each other out, so it's going to be x squared minus 25. We want to put that back into a bracket, and we want to subtract whatever we get over on this side. Okay, so if I expand this one out, I get x squared plus 2x plus 8x and plus 16. So these two in the middle can change to a 10x. So it ends up being x squared. Oop, that is definitely not an x squared plus 10x plus 16. And because we're going to be subtracting that, remember, I'm going to change that to a positive, and then everything inside the brackets is going to change. That becomes a negative. This positive right here is going to become a negative, and this positive right here is going to become a negative. So I have x squared minus 25 plus all of this that's in there, and I now just need to combine all my like terms. So you can see right here I've got an x squared and I have a negative x squared. They're just going to cancel each other out. I've got a negative 10x, and there are no other x's anywhere, so I'm going to have a negative 10x. That one is finished. And now I deal with my constants. I have a negative 25 and a negative 16, and combined together that is going to be a negative 41, and that would be your final answer. Okay, question number B says 9a plus 4 times 4a minus 9, and we're going to subtract from it 6a minus 5 squared. Okay, so there are a few things that we need to recognize right away. I'm squaring that first, and I'm going to be subtracting it from whatever is calculated on this side. So let's start off with our 6a minus 5 all squared. Now we can again expand this out using FOIL, 6a minus 5 times 6a minus 5, or I can follow the rules that we learned earlier. So we're going to square the first term, so 6a squared becomes 36a squared. Then the middle term is calculated by multiplying these two together. So 6 times negative 5 is negative 30a. Negative 38 times 2 is going to be negative 60a. And finally, we square the last term. Negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this over a little bit, and don't forget we're going to be subtracting whatever I get on the other side here. So I'm just going to use FOIL. 9a times 4a is going to be 36a squared. The inside terms and the outside terms give us negative 81a and a positive 16a. And finally, the last term gives us a negative 36. So that's going to be in brackets, that's in brackets, and I'm going to subtract that from that right there. Okay, so what do I need to do? Well, I'm going to finish sort of simplifying and combining the like terms on this one. So I get 36a squared, and I have negative 81, and we're going to subtract or add to that 16, and we end up with a negative 65a minus 36. And on the other side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the signs of everything. So this is going to become a negative 36, and that changes to a positive. This becomes a positive, and this one would become a negative. So if I was to rewrite this out, it'd be minus 36a squared plus 60a and minus 25. So I've got this long string of terms, and there's a bunch of them in there that are like terms. So we just need to take our time to find them and do the integer math correctly. So I've got 36a squared, and that's a positive 36a squared, and I've got a negative 36a squared, so we can see that those cancel each other out. Next, I've got a negative 65a and a positive 60a, so I have a negative 5a right there, and those two are done. Finally, I've got a negative 36 and a negative 25, and if I combine those together, I'm going to get a negative 61. So our final answer is going to be negative 5a minus 61. Okay, moving on to class example 4. Again, same thing, just a little bit more complex. So basically, we'll take a look at letter A, example A. We've got a single term, 5x, being multiplied to a trinomial. Then we're going to subtract from that the product of two binomials. So we'll start off by dealing with the first part of that on the left. So we have 5x times 3x squared minus 7x plus 1. So all we need to do in this case is feed those chickens. So we get 5x times 3x squared is going to be 15x cubed. 5x times negative 7x is going to be negative 35x squared. And 5x times 1 is going to be a positive 5x. Now all of that is going to be, let's move it over here. It is going to be subtracted from the product of those two binomials. So I'm just going to move this down here, and I'll do the work with those two binomials up top. So what we have there, the second part of it is going to be 4x plus 3x squared times 5x minus 8. Okay, and we're just going to do the first, the outside, the inside, and the last. Okay, so 4x times 5x is going to be 20x squared. The outside is 4x times negative 8, which is negative 32x. The inside is going to be a positive 3x squared times 5x, which is going to be 15x cubed. And the last two are going to be 3x squared times negative 8, which is going to be negative 24x squared. So we want to take a look at this and see if we can combine anything. And you can see that we've got a 20x squared right here and a negative 24x squared. So if I combine those two together, I have negative 4x squared. So we've also got this 15x cubed. So I've got a positive 15x cubed, and I have a negative 32x. Okay, so we're going to take this and move it down. And we're best to put a bracket around it. And we're going to say we're going to subtract those. So everything on the right will be subtracted from everything on the left. So because I have this negative sign here, I'm going to change that to a plus. And then everything that's inside here, the sign will become opposite of what it currently is. So the positive 15x cubed becomes negative, the negative 4x squared becomes positive, and the negative 32x becomes positive. Now I can basically just look at both sides and combine like terms because I have this addition sign in between. So let's start off with our degree 3. So what do I have? I've got 15x cubed, and over here I've got a negative 15x cubed, and those are going to cancel each other out. We're going to move on to the degree 2, and I have a negative 35x squared and a positive 4x squared, and when I combine those two together, I'm going to have a negative 31x squared. Finally, on the end, I have a 5x, and on the other side, I've got a 32x. Combined together, those will become 37x, and that is our final answer. All right, let's take a look at class example 5. This one's just going to take a little bit more thinking. So we basically have to apply some of the principles and rules that we already learned and try and work things backwards a little bit here. So it says we're starting off with x squared plus 20x plus 50, but we're saying that we can rewrite that as x plus a squared and add the value b to there. Now b can be a positive number or a negative number. And we just need to remember sort of the rules right here when we are squaring a binomial. And that is, this first term is squared, which becomes right there. For the second term right here, it becomes whatever value is here in front of the x, which is 1, times whatever a is, and then we double it. So essentially, what we need to do, because this is a 1 in front of the x, we just need to take that number and divide it by 2. And so in that case, the a is going to be 10. So this is going to break down into x plus 10 times x plus 10. Now, notice that in the end, we end up with this 50 here, but if I was to expand this one out, we're not going to end up with a 50 there. So let's expand this out. And what do we get? We get x squared. And in the middle, I should get my 20x by following that rule. And on the end, I'm going to get 10 times 10, which is 100. But what are we looking for? We're looking for 50. So basically what I need to do now is add to that another number. So that number is going to be whatever 100 is. I need to essentially go like this. 100 plus the b is going to equal the 50 that we have right there. Now I just need to take the 100. I'm going to go minus 100 from this side, which is going to cancel that. Go minus 100 from that side, and I get b is equal to negative 50. So in this case, we determined that a is equal to 10 and b is equal to negative 50. Final answer. Now that the lesson is done, you have an at-home assignment that will be brought into class and submitted as your homework. So we have number 1, multiply these two binomials together, x minus 9 times x plus 9. Number 2, we're going to multiply this through, and don't forget that we are squaring the binomial and then multiplying by 5. And finally, question number 3, where we're going to be finding the product sort of on the left-hand side of that subtraction and finding the product on the right-hand side, and then I will be subtracting and following the rules of when you're subtracting a polynomial from another polynomial. So you'll get that done at home, bring it to class, and of course you're welcome to start the in-class assignment at home if you want to, but other than that, in class we'll be working on all the questions on pages 295 to 297.